Hello, everyone. This is ATX Poker Bink the River. I am John Shack, and I am here with a two-time WSOP circuit ring winner and ATX Poker Player of the Month, Aaron McEvoy, also known as Aaron on TCH Live. For those of you watching for the first time, this is going to be a hand analysis video featuring Aaron while he's playing from last month's streams. If you don't know TCH Live, it's the live stream coming from the Texas Card House in beautiful Austin, Texas. You can check the description and the links below. In this episode, we're running back some hands with Aaron from last month's streams of 5-5 and 1-3 uncapped Texas Hold'em. Let's get right into the action. So Aaron, in this first hand, you're going to be up against the TCH Live 5-5 legend, Big Daddy Chaz.
Anytime you're in a hand against Big Daddy Chaz, you really got to be ready to, kind of put your foot down and, buckle in, basically, because, he's a very aggressive player. He definitely knows what he's doing. And, you have to be prepared to be really put to the test. This hand played out a little bit differently, I would say, than it could have. But, let's just get into it. So Big Daddy opens middle position, early middle position. And I look down at ace-4 of hearts. Now, some players will go ahead and raise this, but I think that a lot of times in position against an aggressive player, just go ahead and doing a flat call here is perfectly acceptable. You'd like to get to see a flop. You're going to connect in a lot of different ways. And, with position on a strong player like that, you can really just kind of see how things develop as the hand progresses. So, we flopped a nut flush draw, which is great. We got a backdoor straight draw on the top and bottom end as well. And Big Daddy's just going to continuation bet a lot here, which he does. So now here, if we raise and get re-raised, that's going to be really bad for us because, we're just piling a bunch of money in with a draw, and he's got, the relevant sets here. So, we're just going to call and take a turn and see what happens. Now, when Big Daddy Chaz slows down with a check, this gives us a real good opportunity to take the betting lead. We've now just turned basically a gutter, and we've still got the nut flush draw. So if we can get a fold here, that's a win for us. And if we go to a river without getting raised, then there's a pretty good chance that we can just fire away, either for value if we get there, or as a bluff because, Chaz has kind of slowed down there. So he's going to call, and we're going to a river. Now the pot's just about $1,000, and we get there, right? So this is like the perfect river for us. Now the question becomes, like, how big do we go here, right? Like, because he's slowed down and checked on the turn, the question in my mind at this point is, like, what's going to pay me, and what sizing do I go for? Right now I've got effectively the nuts here, right? So I could go super big, like really polar, but it just doesn't feel like he's going to have a lot of good hands that he can call me with here if I go for that big polarizing bet. So I pick a much smaller size here. Now, this is sort of a bet that I'm merging with a lot of my queens, right? So going for value for sure, but trying to get called by pretty much exactly what Chaz has here, which is, a pair of jacks. Because he's just not going to have a lot of queens. So now in his mind, he's going through, what am I getting to this river with, and then leading for this relatively small size, right? So maybe I called on the flop with 8s or 9s or 7s, something like that, right? And now I'm getting to this river, and I'm saying to myself, I can't really check behind. I feel like he's got too much showdown value, and I'm going to try to push him off of a jack, for example. So picking this small sizing, sort of merging that between my flushes and maybe my, my king queens, something like that, along with my bluffs. And sure enough, he kind of thinks that I'm on an under pair, something like that, and pays it off.
In this next hand, you're in a hand with J-Stack and another aggressive player named Duck with Ace-King.
These are two players that I've played with before. J-Stack definitely has made an appearance on TCH Live on several occasions. Very aggressive player, definitely likes to mix it up. Duck I'm a little bit less familiar with, but I also do know that he tends to play in a much more aggressive style than sort of a lot of players will. So in this hand, we've got an early mid position open from Big Al, and then J-Stack on the button decides to 3-bet it up to 125. And Duck here with a pretty small stack just decides to flat call almost half of his stack here. And then I look down and I'm looking at ace king here. So this is definitely a spot where I'm making a sizable raise. And the real, the only effective stack that I'm concerned about at this point is the original raiser with Big Al, because he's got, he's almost got my stack. Whereas the other two players, like, I'd be happy to just get it in at any point here. Like, pre-flop, on the flop, it doesn't matter. Like, they have, a stack that is just getting in and I don't care. I've got ace king here. So I make a sizable raise, and the only concern, again, is whether or not Big Al actually has the goods and decides to just, like, go nuts. When he lets it go, then, this hand pretty much plays itself. But what's interesting is here J-Stack now calls, right? So he puts about half of his stack in. Now, when a player does this, they almost never have a pair, right? If they've got a pair, or like ace king themselves, they're just going to ship it behind and just, realize their equity. They're just going to go for it. So when J-Stack flats here, it definitely shows to me that he does not have a very strong hand, and that he's just sort of hoping to bink something on the flop and, kind of go with it from there. So, in my mind now, it's just a matter of how do we get the rest of his money in? And against a very aggressive player like that, oftentimes, if you show any weakness whatsoever, whether or not there's actual fold equity, that player is going to pile it in, with, the intention being that, maybe I totally missed and I just have an air ball and I just have to let it go and don't get to realize the rest of my equity. Of course, in this hand, that's just not going to happen with ace king, but we end up flopping, total gin. I mean, there's just nothing about this flop that's scary. And if we go ahead and continue betting here, it gives him an opportunity to potentially fold and save the rest of his money. So we're just going to go ahead and check. He snaps it in, and we just snap call behind, of course. And we get a very favorable run out. We dodge all the jacks. And yeah, we pick up a really nice pot there. And yeah, Duck was pretty tilted at this point. I remember he had lost a couple of hands, and then, that was his spot with ace queen, right?
A captain is a TCH regular and an actual boat captain on the Mississippi River. A little fun fact. El Captain, again, is another aggressive player from the streams. I'm sure you've played with him on and off the streams as well at TCH.
Yeah, definitely had a couple of very interesting experiences with my man Captain. He's a very personable guy, very a lot of fun at the table, and definitely a fun player to play against as well. He definitely is not afraid to mix it up. So in this hand, yeah, so he goes ahead and limps. I think we had a $15 straddle, and he goes ahead and limps with the king 10. And I look down on the button and see, pretty raggy hand, 7-5. But this hand can actually play pretty well. And I think when you are sort of folded to or just flat called to on the button, and you look down at a hand like this, it can be very profitable to mix this into your opening range. And as we can see from this flop right here, you can connect in a pretty good way sometimes, and it gives you, so first of all, the hand itself can connect well, but also just raising in position, of course, is never a bad thing. So on this flop, we're looking at ace high, and that gives us obviously just all of the nut hands. All of the best hands are going to be in our range here, and particularly since Captain has just limped and then called from behind, he's just not going to have a ton of strength here most of the time. So yeah, so he goes ahead and he checks it over to me, and I'm going to just make a standard continuation bet with a lot of my hands, this one definitely being solidly in there. And this is a hand that's sort of merged for value and as a bluff, right? So I've got a pair. If he had something like tens or something weird that he just decided to flat call, then, he might be afraid of that ace. And, we could potentially get a better hand to fold. But we always have the clubs as sort of a backup, right? And sure enough, we could just get there right away. So he makes the call, and we peel off our club right on the turn. And at this point in the hand, I'm feeling very confident about the strength of my hand. Now, of course, if another club peels off, like let's say that it goes check bet again, and he calls, and another club comes off, like that could actually be dangerous for us. But let's see what happens, right? So at this point too, I was also just kind of getting this vibe that Captain was ready to make a move. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but I remember being in this spot and thinking to myself, I'm gonna bet like absolutely for value here, and I will not at all be surprised if Captain just jams it, right? Like trying to represent the hand that I have. And it turns out a little bit differently than that. So I think I bet, what is this, 250? Yeah. And, he just like instantly reaches for chips and puts out a call. And so that wasn't quite the move that I thought. I was thinking that he was going to rip it there. So then we get to this river, and I'm still kind of feeling that there's something fishy going on, right? And I don't know, there's not a lot of hands in there that he could have that he wouldn't have raised with, right? Like, what king high flushes would he have just flat called and then called my raise on the button with? So, I mean, I'm just never worried about being beaten here. And he kind of counts out his chips and thinks it over and then goes for it. So I'm like, all right, I got this flush. And you can see how quickly I turned the hand over, that I was pretty sure I was good. And sure enough, I was. So this was a very interesting spot, and one of those times where Captain and a lot of other players, I think, that like to play aggressively will try to, sort of spice things up and take a little bit of an unorthodox line to try to push you off a pot.
All right, Aaron, in this next hand, you're up against George Mad Bomber. He's actually a TCH regular.
Yeah, so George, I guess he got the nickname the Bronstein Bomber. I think it's his last name or something. And yeah, very, very interesting player. He's very aggressive and will put you in spots that you're very uncertain of what he's holding. He's either got the nuts or he's got absolute air, right? And he's piled in, a pot size bet or something. And it can be very disconcerting if you have, like a bluff catcher or something, because you just don't know which way to go with it. In this hand, I don't really have a bluff catcher. I have, the nuts. So we're going to go ahead and open. We're under the gun +1. We raise it to 20 and George flat calls. We get around the rest of the table. I think we pick up another caller or two. And, it's starting to get kind of ugly. And this happens a lot, right? When you open early position with a really strong hand in some of these games here in Texas where people just love to see flops. So we're going 5 ways to a flop, and I've got aces, right? So this could be disaster, right? I mean, a lot of times you're just going to get outflopped, and that sucks. But here we get a very favorable flop, right? I mean, this is perfect for us. We've got, this low, unsuited, paired board, and we're betting this every time, and we're feeling very good about our position. So we're not going huge. We're just going to go about 2/3 pot, and we're going to kind of see how things develop around here. It's definitely possible that someone called us with ace-4 suited or pocket sixes, right? Like, that's very possible, but they're going to let us know pretty quick, right? Presumably. Now, George goes ahead and makes a raise right away. And, this to me was sort of something that I'd seen a little bit before, where you're feeling like, as George, like, I've got a pair higher than the board and my opponent might have ace king, right? So I'm going to put in a raise. That's sort of like what I'm feeling is going on in George's mind here. So he puts in this raise, and it's a small raise though. Like, ace king is never folding, right? And neither are the rest of the big hands. So you haven't really gotten that much information. Now, if he had raised $300 or something like that, I'm not saying that's the right play, but had he done that, then ace king might let it go. So at this point, he still is thinking to himself that I might have ace king, right? So he hasn't gotten enough information to really make the determination, and he just decides, well, all right, I'm just going for it. I'm hoping he's got the ace king, and I'm ripping it in here. And no, he's got aces, and I'm toast, right? So, it's you can put yourself in kind of a tricky spot there when you raise with these sort of middling pairs, and do so in a way that doesn't actually define your opponent's hand. So, you know, it was very favorable for me, and you know, I think yeah, it just worked out really well.
The last end of the segment comes from a 1-3 game where you were under the gun with pocket twos, also known as ducks.
Yeah, so, you know, these small pocket pairs, especially out of position, are, you know, potentially dangerous for you. But actually, so I was in the straddle, I believe. Yeah, so I'm in the straddle. So we had an open by Albert and several callers in between. And it gets around to me like, yeah, of course, I'm always taking a flop with this for $10, right? And this is actually a really good spot. Like, we're getting 8-1 on our money here, and that's about how often we're going to flop a set. So, you know, we're praying for a deuce ball, and what do you know? We get one right there in the window, just about. So, you know, there was an open from Albert pre-flop, and, you know, oftentimes what you're going to do is just sort of check to that player. But this board just totally doesn't connect with the pre-flop raiser, right? Like, unless he's just got a big pair or something. And so I just think that this is a great spot to lead. So I go ahead and put 2/3 pot out here just to kind of, you know, whittle down the field here, because there were so many callers pre-flop that is, you know, there's certainly a player out there with an ace, right? Like, that's almost a guarantee. And there could be a player out there with a 5, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and put some money into this pot, get all the riffraff out of there, and just kind of, you know, get it down to, you know, somebody who's got a reasonable piece of equity and see what we can do. Albert calls, and he's the only caller, and our nightmare card comes off on the turn, which is a 5. Luckily, it goes check, and he checks behind, and we fill up on the river. So this is just like perfect, right? So now we're going to Value Town, and we're just hoping that, you know, Albert over there did have an ace, and he's checked it back to us to kind of try to fade this card on the river, and it didn't happen. So now here we are, and we're going to try to get our value. And so we're going big, and we're going to bet almost full pot. And, you know, just a player with an ace is just almost always going to have to call there. And sure enough, he does. You know, he turns over, I think it was ace king, and yeah, we banked it on the river again. So running good.
Thanks for joining us for ATX Poker Bink the River with special guest Aaron McEvoy. Smash that like button, hit subscribe to be informed about some great content we got coming out soon. We'd like to thank TCH Live for hosting great games. You can catch them every Sunday, Monday, and Thursday. Again, check their YouTube channel and website link below in the description. Also, check out Shop ATX Poker in the description below. I'm John Shack. This is Aaron McEvoy. Peace.